Hi everyone, it's Natalie here, and today I thought what we would start doing is looking at the structure and order of the Mariel Tarot. So in the series that I started back in November with the New Beginnings 2020 event, I wanted to go more deeply into the way that the deck is structured. So it's mentioned a lot, and certainly I refer everyone to the interview that Cassia from Tarot Map did with Marie White about the deck. It's a really, really good interview with a lot of valuable information about the way the deck, what her decisions and choices were and where they came from, and a lot of the things that influenced the way that she composed the deck and just all of it. It's very valuable. I will hopefully remember to put a link in the description here. But I thought, as we're looking at these different spreads, part of the challenge, I think, of the Mariel Tarot is in terms of getting to work with it, understand it, know it better, all of that, is understanding better how she's working with the overall structure, what she's borrowing from Golden Dawn, and then keeping in mind too that there's the Rider-Waite-Smith or the Smith-Waite, personally my preference, but we all abbreviate it, tend to abbreviate it as RWS, but there's that particular perspective on the cards which deviates from what had come before it with the Marseille. Then there is the sort of second Golden Dawn iteration in the form of the Thoth or the Thoth, or Toth, however you want to say it, that integrates the use of all of the same similar Golden Dawn principles, but takes it a slight step further in integrating Hermetic Kabbalah and the Tree of Life into the structure of the deck. And there are ways in which Marie White has borrowed from both. And it, of course, when you look at the ways in which Crowley worked with the Thoth, you do get that transposition of 8 and 11 once again between the Strength and Justice cards. So instead of having Strength as 8 and Justice as 11, they flip again. So you have Justice as 8 and Strength as 11. But what Crowley does is change the order of the court cards. So Marie White has borrowed from all three traditions in multiple ways, multiple manners, and made it work in a way that makes sense to her. So I thought we would go through and kind of decode some of this. So I'm going to swap the camera around, and I'm going to do my best to keep this as simple as possible, I would say. So if there's something, if you're a big esoteric and occult, nerd, because I'm definitely one of those. My knowledge base is expanding tremendously as a result of this deck and trying to get answers for myself. Suffice it to say, if there's something that I don't cover that you would like for me to go into greater depth about, please let me know in the comments. I would also say, if you know more than I do, and there's something that I've overlooked, missed, or misrepresented that you feel is really important to point out, please, please, please make sure that you mention that to me. I'm absolutely aware of what my shortcomings are, and I'm working very, very diligently to make up for them or overcome them. So with that said, let's swap the camera around and have a look. What you can see here in front of you is all four of the suits laid out in order, or the order in which most of us are accustomed when it comes to working specifically with RWS. Okay, so when Golden Dawn based decks lay out their suits in a way that is in harmony with the traditions behind the Golden Dawn. And I don't want to confuse anybody or get anybody lost here, so I'm just going to keep this very simple. What we get is a representation of the name of God, right? So we're working with, we look at this representation here of the tetragrammaton spread, we're working right to left. We're looking at Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. So wands, cups, swords, discs. If we take this the way I've got it, written out here, going downward, we have wands, cups, swords, and discs, right? So we've got them in this order. So what we've got is essentially masculine, feminine, cups, right? Wands are pointy, swords are pointy. Those are the two masculine suits, right? Cups are round, discs are round, empty vessel, circular. So we've got the two feminine suits either side. Well, this is why when a deck creator has pulled together a deck and they present their cards in a different order, I'm always very curious as to why they've changed the order of the deck, okay? So back in I don't know, whenever it was, in the 90s, when I was first really putting in hardcore study into the, RWS system to get my tarot certification, this was really heavily emphasized in a lot of the books that I read. And for a specific reason, the order of the suits counts. Because, it starts with this sort of divine spark, this inspiration, spirit, and it finishes with earth, right? With something manifesting in physical form. And there is a purpose and an intent in that, right? And the way that it's ordered in the Golden Dawn, specifically the RWS system. So when the order of the suits is changed, actually it's that way in all Golden Dawn based decks. So I'll just say that first. It doesn't matter which one you're working with, whether you're looking at Thoth based decks or RWS based decks, they all do this. They all do this. And the intent has a purpose. So when a deck creator changes the order of the suits in their deck, if they're not doing it consciously and they don't talk about why they're doing it, it instantly tells me something about their knowledge of the deck, that there are some key principles that they're just not aware of. And they're not really paying attention to. Marie White is definitely very intentional, if nothing else. Let me show you what she's done to reorder the 4 suits in her deck. She has transposed swords and cups in her deck so that we have the 2 pointy ones first, the 2 round ones second, but we're still starting from the spark of inspiration and creativity and spirit, and we're still ending with discs, material reality, earth, 3 dimensions, etc. Okay? So, in between, what happens? She has a very specific way of setting this up, okay? Which I really love, actually, the way she's done this. It's beautiful. It makes sense to me in a way that although the other ordering made sense, this one makes more sense in terms of applicable approach and the way that she's using it within the deck. So we have this spark of inspiration, right? It's not mental, it's not verbal yet. It is intuitive, it is spirit, it is creativity. Right? That spark gives way to thought. Oops, sorry, I keep moving the camera. Thought, word, idea, mind, and intent on creation. Okay? From these 2, there is a feeling created. Something can begin to manifest or pull together. Right? There's a divine sense, a feel, of the way things may be able to congeal or come together that happens through the emotions. And it finally gives rise in physical reality in the form of the discs and in material reality. Okay? So that's how she is ordering all of the cards in her deck. And you'll notice that she starts with the first 4 aces and talks about them first, then moves on to the 2s, etc., etc. Okay? So in the aces, she has then taken this a step further. She is definitely referring back to the Magician card in her aces, right? And the Magician, as we know, is representing, he's representing the tetramorph, right? Which is all 4 elements in some form, okay, pulled together into some form at once. He's representing that tetramorph through his use of this Merkaba or Metatron's cube. So all of these 4, instead of being integrated into the Magician, where we see the... Sorry about that. I went to adjust something and accidentally stopped the video. But what we see here, instead of having all 4 of these elements represented on a table with the Magician holding the wand, we see that there's the possibility of integrating them spiritually, right? And in reality. But only, we can only do this by taking that deep dive into the abyss, right? So we see the Fool rushing forth. We don't see what he's rushing forth toward. If we were to see him seeing this Magician and rushing forth to confront the Magician, it would be sort of like a wonderful Star Wars, I like to think, it would be a wonderful Star Wars moment where he rushes forth into, to confront this Jedi Magician because of this bright light, and finds himself through the rabbit hole, through into the abyss. So instead of leaping off of a mountain and into the abyss, he's leaping off, he's running toward this and morphing into the abyss, taking all of these elements represented here by the aces, which we'll get into in a second, and he's going into that abyss with his tools. Okay, so this shape, this tetragrammaton, or sorry, why is my brain farting all over the place? The Merkaba, there we go. So this Merkaba, in this case, is representing, also representing the chariot described by Ezekiel in his mystical vision. And the Ezekiel's mystical vision, again, I've covered that in other videos, so you may want to go back or have a look at the handout. The PDF explains this very, very carefully and succinctly. But, inside of that vision, each wheel inside the vision was, and I'll get into that more deeply in another video, right? It's hard to know how to describe, there's so much to this deck. Okay. In that vision, Ezekiel saw cherubim or angels. He saw one that had a lion's head. Okay, and if we look closely at Marie White's wand, Ace of Wands, that is in fact a lion with its mouth open to closed and shaking its head back and forth. And the way Marie White is envisioning these angels is by holding these elemental assignments in their bellies. And she intends that they are neither one gender nor the other, but both, very, very intentionally. Which I really love and appreciate in this deck a great deal. One of the cherubim in Ezekiel's vision had the head of a hawk or an eagle. So again, we have an angel with an eagle's head. One had the face or the head of man. So again, we have another angel here with the head or face of man. And the final one had the head or the face of a bull. And the four of these together, whether they're represented as, angels with, the many different heads, or whether it's simply through the elements and the elemental designations, anytime we see that somewhere in a tarot deck, that is referred to as a tetramorph. Tetra is 4, morph, morph. I'm sure I will have looked this up and you'll be seeing letters at the bottom of the screen. Just for clarity's sake. So, yeah. So we have those. So each of these aces contains the purity and magic of these angels, as well as the purity and magic of each of the elements and all of their potential. So something important to know about this deck and the four suits is that Marie White is taking us on a journey through each of the suits, right? In all tarot decks, we see that being the case, right? You go from the ace to the 2, which leads to the 3 and leads to the 4, and so on. It is very indirect when you look at it in this context. Okay, it feels very, very indirect. But when you look at it through the context of her also taking us on a journey through each of the elements, right? So we're starting in each number with that number and that element and the way they combine. And the way then that it moves from a wand, the energy of a wand, to the energy of a sword. And air. From there to the energy, what would be the purest form? What would be the purest form? Moving from there to here. So let's look at that for a second. What we get here with the Ace of Wands is we get, the fire of inspiration, that kind of pure feeling that goes through us that's a lot like anger. It's fiery, it's spirit, it's inspiring, it's kundalini, it's heat, it's passion, it's something that disturbs the whole being and literally shakes us up into making something happen. Okay? When we go from there, what happens when we move from that inspired, starts in the gut or in the genitals, right? There's a reason why we have the red starting here and moving all the way up to here, right? That it goes through the entirety of our being, where it then gets trapped in the head. Yeah? So this eagle, when there's an evolution from just this to the air, from the fire to the air of the mind, as something attempts to go from spirit to full manifestation, we get this eagle who is the eagle angel who's incensed. They're bound, they cannot fully move, but there is so much energy. Imagine all of that energy moving right up here to the mind. It's also activating this sort of solar plexus space where there's power, right? But the power is very, very firmly and intently lodged in the intellect. It's in the mind. So the bird's beak is free. The bird could speak, translate to word or sound, and think and work with this tremendous visual focus, and that's it. Right? That's all. That's all she wrote. There is not yet the ability for it to move further. In order for that to happen, it has to travel back down through the body. And here's where we see that beginning to happen, right? In the Ace of Cups. Now, this one I would say is pure mental energy. It's pure focus, pure intent, pure sound, the sound that is not yet word, word that's not yet formed, but the intent is clear. Okay, it takes further up in the numbers for it to become rich enough to become fully formed word. Moving from there, we have to shift out of the head and back into the body, right? Back down in through the body. And of course, we're warming this space here. We're staying in the land or we're moving into the land of yin, right? These are the two yang forces that push. Then we get these two yin forces that receive and accept. And first we end up with the cups or the water, right? Something that flows down. It flows down from the head through the body. And in its purest form, that water or that heart space where this hand is, where, there's a lot of focus here and in the belly, is pure compassion. It's boundless, pure compassion, pure heartfelt intent and blessing. It's the blessing, that moves through beingness in order to make things solid. And it's the kind of release that we get through crying, right? It blesses and releases. If you think about how good, we'll resist it because we don't like it. We'd like to stay here, right? We'd like to stay here or here when we're angry and upset. We're furious. It's hard to take all of that energy, right? And then we get it here and it's stuck in our thoughts and stuck in our head. We have to cry. We have to let that energy manifest through the heart space and the emotions. But we can't do it without breath. So through that breath, through that air, that intent to move things through the body, we get the emotions and the ability to re-inhabit the body. And it's a blessing. When you feel grief and you cry, right? You cry and you weep. The purity of those tears, if you've ever had this experience, you'll know what I mean. It gives way to joy, to a relief of the suffering. It warms and tender. It makes the heart space physically feel tender and vulnerable. And that is what's being described here in the Ace of Cups in this deck. Okay. Then we get to the Ace of Discs, right? We've moved through that purity of emotion. The form, if you see, I love how she's done this. We have the snake that's kind of carried over in a way in this card, and it's like this new form is able to step forth from where it's been waiting to manifest. We have these beautiful little cow eyes, and the posture here is one of total innocence, total purity. When something manifests from that level of compassion, that is what we have. We have this very, very pure, innocent beingness that's very awake, that holds all four elements in its physical being. And then we have this labyrinth telling us that if we're going to understand how to make use of that, what do I do now? Well, you have to go on this little journey through this maze and untangle how that's going to work. But if you take that purity of intent, and allow that simple, pure manifestation to carry you forward, then, I'm jumping a little bit, but then you'll have all the insight you need to start untangling how to get through that green labyrinth, right? Okay, so that's how that works. Now, if we look at it with the Magician, I think it's really fascinating because then we see this wonderful magician here, you know, this is what the magician is giving us. He's giving us these tools. Let's see if I can prop him up here. Right, so he's giving us the pure inspiration, the pure being, the pure spirit, you know, that impulse, that inspiration that moves right from the base chakra all the way up, above the head, manifests back down through the hands, etc., and gives us that spark. Sometimes through anger, sometimes through that rawness, that raw energy, that raw heat. All of that's fire, raw impulse. There's no verbal to it, there's no emotional to it, but we definitely, you know, we very definitely feel sense, and it's creative. It wants us to drive forward. It wants us to do something. Okay, so he gives us, the magician is giving us this. The magician gives us a concentrated, you know, something that moves all the way up and into the head here, right, where it's shaking and so on, and then focuses it deeply, intently, and very purely. You know, it's a highly focused mind that's in, you know, the mind is set, the gaze is set, but it's trapped. The way to untrap it is to breathe, to make sound, have something come out, right? The beak opens and raw sound comes out because there's a breath. We're taking the inspiration from here, and inspire means to take the breath, to, you know, for a breath to go in, right? To be in spirit, to have spirit go in. Respire means to breathe the spirit in. So we're breathing in the wands, the spirit energy of the wands, with this remarkable intent in order to make sound and manifest. What happens when you do that? Something unlocks. Anybody who's done much singing or tried to learn to sing or speak publicly knows about this. You know, think about how these two things play out, right? Your body locks down, you can't think, you can't move, and then you try to open up and speak, and, you know, if you've ever had that experience where you just want to cry, you know exactly what I mean. But you have that purity, and what happens with that purity where it's not verbal, it's still not verbal, it's just pure heart, sound, feeling, emotion. Okay, we have that purity there. It's often tears, tears of joy, tears of compassion, tears of grief, whatever it is, right? But it's that kind of purity that cleanses the heart. It's that kind of emotion that cleanses the heart. And that gives way to this ability to manifest in a very pure form and begin traversing the abyss in a physical state, right? And so we have this journey happening with the Fool. And then this is what leads us forward and towards the second person we meet on that journey, which is the High Priestess, right? So I think this is enough for now. We'll just start here, and we'll look at the High Priestess in the next one. All right, everybody, thank you so much if you're still here. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you soon. All right, bye for now.